We are Flint River Presbytery.
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 A multi-part video series by Presbyterians for Presbyterians. The vision of our executive presbyter, We Are Flint River Presbytery, introduces church members and church officers to the shared mission, organization, and resources of our presbytery right here in Southwest Georgia.
Okay, COM, what it stands for is Committee on Ministry. And my first really acquaintance with the COM and what it did was because I was tapped to serve on our pastor nominating committee. And oh my goodness, I was so grateful that I wasn't looking, or we weren't looking as a church for a pastor all by ourselves. I mean, we had so much support coming not only from Flint River, but the denomination. I mean, it's the whole thing.
That's our Committee on Ministry, and that's the group made up of pastors and elders, like all of our committees are. The group that watches over our congregations, our pastors, the relationship between pastors and elders, the relationship between sessions and their congregations. This is the committee that tries to show up and be supportive of our congregations in times of joy, providing training and resources, but we also try to show up in times of difficulty or conflict or in times of transition, perhaps when a church is in between pastors. It's the Committee on Ministry that will send liaisons who will partner with our excellent executive presbyter to be present to congregations in whatever needs they might have.
Guidance, support, encouragement, and thinking outside the box are really, really helpful. Also, since we're Presbyterian, we don't want to go against how we're supposed to function as Presbyterians. And so guiding a church through that process is really, really helpful. It also, having somebody who has been through that process is helpful because you have that experience. Now, having said that, of the churches that I've been involved in with transitioning, including my own 1 year, not a single one of them is exactly the same. And so everything's going to be different, but there's some basic foundational information that's the same.
And then the other thing that I think the thing that I enjoyed most was not only then did I get to expose to the pastors that were being brought in for other churches, the new pastors, because we were at least told about those, and they had to be approved by the presbytery, and so we obviously as Committee on Ministry were also approving those people. But even the supply list, I think that was also useful to me, and you're just so encouraged when you see so many people from different backgrounds, different places, wanting to be a part of the ministry of the church, wanting to serve God.
I look at the Committee on Ministry as kind of the arms of the presbytery, in the sense that the hands that are there help the hands in each individual congregation do some specific ministry tasks that it may need help with. The arms are there to hold congregations in difficult times, to hold the hands of a congregation, to walk them through processes of ministers coming and going, training in difficult circumstances and in celebrations. And those arms can embrace churches that are in hard places. And it really is a relational piece that is at the core of both the presbytery and our Presbyterian understanding.
COM has an awesome responsibility. It's useful, it's fascinating, it's uplifting. Working on COM, you also get to go inside the doors of the other churches and you feel a part of those churches.
Basically does three things. It is there to take care of the pastors, both as a new pastor entering, connecting with the congregation, and as pastors continue to work with their congregations. It helps, it's there to help congregations in their selection of a pastor, working with them directly to help them in their selection of a pastor.
Committee on Ministry is tasked with supporting the ministry of all the congregations in our presbytery. Sometimes we think about that work as primarily focusing on supporting pastors and their work with congregations, but increasingly more of our congregations are served by commissioned ruling elders. They're served by stated supply arrangements. They're served by wonderful pastors who are not actually Presbyterian pastors and therefore not members of our presbytery. And so I think COM's role is to support those congregations just as much, and supporting them and seeing that they are, and equipping them to do ministry, whatever that looks like.
And it is there to be supportive of the different of the congregations, in specifically, I guess, when there are problems. But I think you can't be there for congregations for their problems if you're not there with them when they're not having problems, and you don't keep in contact with them on a regular basis.
Committee on Ministry supports our clergy. A Committee on Ministry, of course, is where a newly called pastor to one of our churches. Now, that does not mean they're a new pastor. They're just new to one of our churches. They meet with COM just to be sure they're the right fit, the right connection for that church. So, but they are the support group for it. They are assigned churches to be a communicator with, to know that the presbytery cares about that congregation.
Certainly, connections and communication between congregations and the presbytery is a really big thing. And so we try to stay in touch with our churches. They can always call Deb, and they can always call us. So each church has a COM representative.
So our presbytery is divided into 4 clusters, geographic clusters, which makes a lot of sense. We have our northwest, northeast, southern, and central clusters. Those churches within those clusters have an opportunity throughout the year to get together. The pastors of those churches have lunches about once a quarter so that they can connect. That's a really important piece, I think, for our pastors. And one of the most important parts for the rest of us is learning who the churches in our cluster are, and then trying to make those bridges between and relationships with the other churches. For example, in our cluster, so I'm in Elmadale, and we're in the central cluster. Our sister church is in Camilla, and so often we traditionally will celebrate Christmas Eve with Camilla, and they come and celebrate certain activities with us, and that benefits both of us. I think if more churches found ways that they had things in common, or maybe even things that they didn't. One church really loves standard music and one church really loves the praise band. You know, if you could find a way to integrate those differences and similarities, it just helps grow your faith journey, and it helps grow our presbytery.
There are liaisons from the committee for every church in the presbytery, for our 4 clusters, to again check in to see what the needs of that congregation are. How can the presbytery, specifically the Committee on Ministry, help as the church lives its life and cycles of ministry?
It's similar to here because we're so spread out, and congregations are not close to each other. They're not neighborhood churches. You don't go a couple miles and pass another one or two of them. And so you have to be more intentional about those connections and making sure that you're staying in touch with other pastors and other elders and other congregations. And I've been really impressed with how Committee on Ministry really wants to help make that happen. And it's not easy by any means. There's a lot of, just management things and policy things we have to keep up with that, we'll do. But the exciting stuff is just helping these congregations to remember there are other Presbyterians out there.
The COM helps churches in times of transition, almost transition and trouble, in times when new pastoral leadership is needed. There's a transition between pastors. When there are difficulties within the congregation, the Committee on Ministry will come in to aid conversation.
COM does a lot of supporting congregations through unusual times, so times of transition, times of discernment, times of conflict, perhaps. I think that it's really important to know as participants in our presbytery that COM is here to be a resource, to be an asset. If there's ever a question or a concern that a church member or a ruling elder has about ministry, about a direction or about a next step, COM is meant to be an asset and a resource to help navigate those situations. And so you can always call the COM chair, or if you happen to know this, read one of the folks who's from your area, your cluster on COM, and just say, this is what we're dealing with and we'd love some support or just a perspective. COM is happy to visit with sessions with congregations and to bring their expertise, but also to ask new questions. Sometimes when you're living in it as a congregation member, as a ruling elder, as the pastor, you don't see the whole picture because you're right in the middle of it. And one of the gifts COM can bring to any situation is an outside perspective, fresh eyes, new questions that maybe hadn't been considered yet, but can lead to new and exciting options and opportunities that otherwise wouldn't have been seen.
The committee educates. We educate clergy, certainly providing healthy boundary training and other sorts of training. I can't remember what right now, but that would be helpful for clergy in our growth and development. And it's so much more than just clergy, because Flint River Presbytery has a large bevy of ruling elders who are trained to serve in pastoral roles. And they might be trained ruling elders serving in the context of their own congregation, or they might be commissioned ruling elders who are called to serve a congregation as a pastor. So all of that training takes place coming out of the Committee on Ministry.
But the Committee on Ministry is a wonderful vehicle for understanding each church and the person who has been called to that church, and in trying to understand what the issues may be. And it's a fairly lengthy process when it comes time to serving on a pulpit nominating committee or whatever it choose to be done. So it may take longer, but it seems to be a surer way of thinking that this might work out.
We walk through this together, and one of the documents for the Committee on Ministry manual, it says nothing that the Committee on Ministry does is more important than nurturing good relationships between congregations and church professionals. And that's, again, a really big umbrella to say when you are in need, when you need help, when you need to celebrate, when you find yourself in, again, both times of crisis, but also of things to lift up and celebrate, Committee on Ministry is there to help you do that.